opportune time, I suppose, to check in with Summit Pointe, and Jeannie Goodrich is here, CEO at Summit Pointe. Good morning, Jeannie.
Good morning, Richard.
Thank you for the time today.
Thank you for inviting us.
You've brought a guest with you today.
I did bring a guest with me today. I would like to take a moment and introduce our new Deputy Director, Tim Nendorf. He is new to Summit Pointe as of January 4th.
Well, hi there, Tim.
Well, hi, Richard. How you doing?
Very good. Welcome in today. What's your job?
So I was hired on as a deputy director at Summit Pointe. So all of our operations that we run for our mental health, developmental disability, and substance use disorder groups and clinicians and everyone at Summit Pointe who helps make community mental health good in our community. So we try to make operations run as smooth as possible for our customers.
All right. Well, let's talk about that, Jeannie. You had a task of figuring out what the administrative structure was going to be like, and now you've done that.
That's correct. So as an interim CEO, the board asked not to fill any of the senior leadership positions. And so when I was named permanent CEO in October, I had that task to look at what that structure would look like for Summit Pointe. In doing so, I created a deputy director position, Tim's position, and he is as he just talked about, he is in charge of all of the internal operations and making sure that Summit Pointe is working on a daily basis.
Okay.
In addition, we have a general counsel, and we have a finance director, and a compliance officer.
All right. And so how does this compare to the previous administrative setup? What's similar or different?
Yeah, so it's a little similar. In the past, as you remember, Summit Pointe was a prepaid inpatient health plan, so their structure was a little larger because of the budget. So they had C-suite positions, so a COO and a CFO.
Mm-hmm.
Where we are today at Summit Pointe, being a community mental health, I took the opportunity to look at other community mental healths and see what their structure looks like, and this is consistent with other community mental healths our size.
Okay. Were there, when you did that, when you studied that, were there areas that you noticed that were in need of greater attention, or areas maybe that weren't, and so this structure reflects that?
Yeah, so, I think we took a little bit more time looking at our financial structure and making sure that we had the right hierarchy and check and balance in there. And also with our compliance officer. We wanted to make sure we had a compliance officer that has a good background in compliance and can bring forward the types of topics and functions that we need to be talking about at Summit Pointe. So those two really were the biggest change, I think, for our organization.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about compliance, does that mean the community mental health requirements that are there for an organization like Summit Pointe, that they're met, or does compliance mean more than that, or something different?
Yeah, well, it's that and more. So
Okay.
I would probably say it's more like a corporate compliance. So we have Medicare and Medicaid dollars that come through Summit Pointe, and so we have an obligation to make sure that they are spent according to those rules and regulations, and so we have to have a monitoring plan. The board has to approve a compliance plan, and we have to have all of that in place. In addition, our compliance officer will look at where our financial audit is, and are we following up on those pieces, and privacy breaches and things like that. So it's really much larger than, sitting in a back room and looking at claims all day long.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right, 8:13. Back in a moment to talk a little bit more about this structure and some name changes you may have read about at Summit Pointe, and that's coming up on WBCK. Today, Jeannie Goodrich is here from Summit Pointe, and Tim Nendorf, who is now been named the Deputy Director at Summit Pointe. We've been talking about a number of things related to the administrative structure now that it is in place. So, Tim, let's talk a little bit about your viewpoint as to how Summit Pointe works and how you've observed it in other places, and is it fairly consistent in your view?
Yeah, so my this is now month 3 for me at Summit Pointe, and I've got the opportunity to dive into our community-based programs where we have social workers working with customers and kind of helping them make life work every day. Diving into our core clinical programs where we have clinicians that are working in individual sessions or group sessions to help people through their mental health issues or substance abuse issues, and it's pretty amazing to see the staff at work on a daily basis. They really just move the ball forward every day for people in our community. And so when it comes to the structure of Summit Pointe and how it works, I think what we're constantly trying to do, and it has been in the past, and we're going to try to move that even further forward. We're constantly trying to see how can we most effectively help our customers, and what does that mean from an administrative standpoint and how we work every day. So what are the simple things that we can do from a simple scheduling standpoint to see as many people as quick as we can to get them the services that they need, or what are we looking at from the broader standpoint of are we structured properly to do that? And I think we're going to be going through that process, coming up here in the near future with a strategic planning process.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that here in a second. This whole thing with the Kalamazoo County shootings and things that went on, some of the reaction to that has been, we need more focus on mental health services. How do you feel about that statement, number one, and either one of you can handle that? And secondly, is the atmosphere at Summit Pointe one in which you say, we're clicking on all cylinders here, or we could be doing more?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to work with our partners throughout the region and in Kalamazoo to talk about how Summit Pointe can support not only our victims and their families here in our community, but what's the regional response to violence,
right?
Like this, and how do we address that? I think that what we've seen is that there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of different organizations, including our community mental health agency, and it's really more about how we connect together and bring everyone together to say, what, I have a competency here, and so let me take on this piece, and you have a competency somewhere else. So when we have people coming in asking for those services, we know where to direct them. Mm-hmm. So I think there's much more of a coordinated effort community-wide that needs to happen. And, I'm excited to work here in Calhoun County to try to figure out who are those players between the hospitals, our providers that we work with already, the school districts. There's a lot of people that provide mental health services in our community, and so how do we get together on a regular basis to talk about how we can respond to these issues when they come up, and also importantly, how do we help on the preventative side of these issues, and what can we do to work together towards that end?
So, Jeannie, in your experience, do you feel that you have those resources in-house now, or do you feel that you need more to meet these kinds of questions?
Yeah, so I think we have great resources right now. I also think, as Tim has suggested, it's not just about Summit Pointe answering this, large capacity issue. It's about us working with the hospital and the school, because it's not in, just one answer. And so, where people will seek treatment, as we've talked about in the past, it's all about stigma, right? So some people will come to a CMH, some people will come to the school where they feel more comfortable. So it's about meeting people where they are. So if the school is the best avenue, then that's where we need to be. It's about prevention services working together as a community to answer the questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I presume that folks in your positions, when something like what happened in Kalamazoo County happens, I presume you have a sense of responsibility immediately, and you say, how can we help here?
Right. The sense of responsibility is the first thing, right, to our community. And then reaching out, the first thing I did was I reached out to my counterpart in Kalamazoo and said, what can we do? What can Summit Pointe do to help you? Mm-hmm. Because you're going through, having to do this within your own community and serve the victims and the aftermath in your community. So what can we do to help? So that was, it's our community, the other communities that are affected, and how can we work together?
We're talking about Summit Pointe and services therein, and we'll take a short break and come back in a second. Talk about WBCK. Jeannie Goodrich and Tim Nendorf are here from Summit Pointe. I have a number of things I want to ask before we get going here again. We want to talk about strategic planning, too, which you're thinking about. There was a published report recently about the payroll at Summit Pointe and the restructuring, and, the previous CEO is making pretty big bucks. That's sort of righted itself maybe in some views, but was it your goal, Jeannie, to create an administrative structure that saved a bunch of money?
Yeah, so it's probably the best analogy is comparison of apples to oranges.
Right.
So yes, it did look like we had a larger payroll, but we also took the opportunity in the last year to bring staff that were contractual over to an employed status.
I see.
And so that started to inflate the payroll as you see it today. And so it wasn't really a good comparison to the old, payroll structure.
Mm-hmm.
But we took a look, and Tim has done some of the statistics. We took a look specifically at the leadership, the senior leadership, and the leadership structure itself to see whether or not, is that where we are, inflating our numbers. It wasn't. It's really where the clinical staff that we brought over from the contractual.
All right. And now you're satisfied with the way things have shaken out, and you're moving forward.
We are moving forward. I think there's a lot of process pieces that we are going to continue to work on, a lot of structure that we might change, but we feel that we've gotten at a point in-house where we can start to now look outside of us. So really, what is the landscape of Calhoun County? What can we do differently? How can we collaborate differently in the community? And what does the role Summit Pointe needs to play in the community?
Part of how you're going forward had to do with names and some offshoots, if you will, of the work you're doing in some locations, and you've decided to change the name.
Sure. So Summit Pointe, before we were Summit Pointe, we were Community Mental Health of Calhoun County.
Sure.
And at that time, we decided to start an outpatient practice. And what feedback from the community at that time was, it's a stigma, it's a barrier to receive treatment from a CMH. It's 25 years ago, so
right.
Lots changed since then. But since that time, so we started behavioral health resources then. Since that time, we became an authority status and became Summit Pointe. So we really had two brands. We had Summit Pointe and Behavioral Health Resources. So we took a look at it right now and said, what makes sense? And so as we started to think about our core clinical services and to get people aware of what Summit Pointe does in the community, it didn't make sense to have two names. So that's the rationale behind the name change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And looking forward, strategic planning, every good organization does that. They try to figure out what the plan will be in the coming years. You're going to be doing that, Tim.
Yeah, so I think, second day on the job, we had a board meeting, and at that board meeting, I was tasked, along with one of our board members, Kathy Sue Dunn, to take a look at building a process to create a strategic plan. And so we're currently going through that process to develop it, and it looks like May we're going to be approaching the timeline where we'll maybe start pushing that forward and pushing that out. And the goal there will be kind of like what Jeannie said just a little bit ago, is to take a look at Calhoun County, what the needs are, and have those real conversations with people out in the community, with our stakeholders and providers out in the community who already provide mental health care, and how they interact with Summit Pointe and how they'd like to interact with Summit Pointe, with our customers and people who represent our customers. What do they need? What works really well, and where do we have opportunities to grow and provide better services for our customers? And then taking a look and involving the entire organization and the staff to take a look at what do we do on a daily basis and how can we make it better? How can we leverage the things that we currently are doing really well, and then where are those opportunities that we can service our customers better by doing something differently? So we'll be taking all of that together and then building a strategic plan with those stakeholders at the table, not just in isolation, from top management making those decisions, but bringing everyone together to cull through all that data that we get and then say, here are the strategic priorities for Summit Pointe so that we can provide the best services possible for this county.
Good old SWOT analysis is what that sounds like.
Exactly right.
Yep.
You know, we were chatting last week with the sheriff and the police chief, and we were discussing the notion of addiction and trying to keep people out of those law enforcement circles where addiction is in play. And one of the points they made was we don't have enough resources in our community for voluntary addiction treatment. Do you see it that way, and do you see Summit Pointe maybe having a role in trying to change that?
So it's a great question. So yes, so we started substance abuse treatment in 2014, did a really small clinic, and we've seen that grow exponentially. So we do provide some outpatient clinic services, but I've had conversation with Chief Blocker, and I am, working with him in his vision, and we're trying to figure out how, as a community, we can come together to help his organization and my organization, and how can we really meet the need. We agree that there are resources that are needed. We struggle with resources for residential treatment for substance abuse.
Right.
And so, really working together to figure out how can we make this better for our community. What we see is when consumers with SA concerns or problems come forward, you have to act then. Right, right. That's the moment when they need treatment, and not in 3 weeks. And so that's really what Chief Blocker and I have had a lot of conversations about.
Right. I think that was his point too when he was here. Was if they know someone who could avail themselves of substance abuse treatment, that is to say, they're ready to, there might not be a clear path to it that they could direct them toward. Sounds like that's part of the discussion you're having.
It is, and it's we have some different models we're taking a look at, and figuring out how we can bring those back to the community and make a difference here.
Do you have a timeline for that, or these are just exploratory conversations?
They're just exploratory right now, but really hoping to solidify something in the next couple months. We do have, a lot of concerns in Calhoun County when it comes to substance use issues, and so, we really need to put that on the forefront.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to further conversations therein.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks to the both of you today. We
Thank you,
appreciate the
Richard.
time. 8:30.